I have 12:01. I am going to go ahead and get us started with some of our preliminary announcements here, just so we do everything that we can to stay on time and uh, respect the fact that you're giving us your lunch hour, and we appreciate that very much. Before I go any further, I just want to let everybody know that I am recording the meeting. The purpose will be to make it available to other counties that were unable to join after the fact, and we'll certainly let everybody know how they can do that. Also, our Commonwealth policy does not allow transcribing programs. So if you have one of those and you see me turn it off, that's why. We're not permitted to allow those to join. This is our June version of the County Commissioners Virtual Brown Bag Series. Our topic today is the Department of Human Services Emergency Operations and the services that we provide. Before I introduce our speakers, I just have to say, in all of the years that I represented the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania and worked very closely with the Department of Human Services, I never knew the extent to which our emergency operations folks were able to provide support and assistance to counties in a variety of ways when emergencies occur. And it's not just bad weather emergencies. I've watched the agency support counties where they've lost major providers of housing supports to folks who are low income, or even a fire at a big facility in one of our counties, and the support that we're able to offer to them. So you're going to learn a little bit about that today. While there is no good time for natural disasters, of course, this is the time of the year where we start seeing some of those major storms start to impact your county. So the timing is good in a way to have this information fresh for all of you. So before I introduce our primary speaker today, I want to note that our Deputy Secretary for Administration, Stephanie Schell, is on the call with us today. All of this occurs within her part of the DHS operation. This is also something that Secretary Arkush has mentioned several times, her interest in making sure that we regularly share this information with all of you in her remembrance of being a county commissioner and trying to address issues like this as they come up. So what we'll do is we will turn it over to our speaker. We'll have the presentation. We'll allow time for both discussion and questions towards the end, if you have any. I will ask you to please either post in the chat that you have a question, and when we get to that point, we'll certainly call on you. If our group remains small enough, we might be able to be a little bit more conversational, but we'll see what happens as we get towards the end of the presentation. So I will just ask Stephanie quickly if she has anything that she would like to say to the group before we turn it over to Devin.
Thanks so much, Brenda. I really just want to echo what you said and thank everybody who's here today. I think we all understand that the worst time to try and learn and form partnerships and relationship is in the midst of a disaster scenario. So the more we talk with each other and get to know each other and sort of understand the way we all work, the stronger we're going to be together in an emergency. So happy to be here with you all today. And I know you're going to learn a lot from Devin, who we are so incredibly fortunate to have leading this work in our Department of Human Services here in Pennsylvania.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. So at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Devin Heberling. He is our Director of Emergency Operations and Planning for the Department of Human Services, and he knows more about this stuff than I ever could have imagined. So you're in good hands with Devin, and I hand things off to him at this point. Thank you so much, all.
And thank you, Brenda, for the kind remarks, and Stephanie as well. Again, as Brenda mentioned, DHS has had this program around since right around 2010, and its purpose was to be able to support as an ancillary service to our partners at the emergency management. One of the things that we've recognized is that sometimes the skill sets are needed to be different than the emergency management coordination. And with the linkages between human services and disasters, there was a need to really develop a responsive entity to be able to support both during major disaster declarations and smaller emergencies. And so our agenda today is relatively straightforward, but I will also say is that I need to apologize that some of this might be new work and maybe a little bit more in depth than what you're used to. And some of you might say, "Well, this is pretty easy stuff," and I've been through it quite a bit. We have counties that are very robust in linking up to the emergency management, and some counties who haven't had a disaster since Hurricane Agnes in 1972. Um, my background really started as a volunteer firefighter back in the early 1990s, and had some internships through college and grad school and worked my way through the process, being both in emergency management and having a heart for human services, being a human services caseworker and case manager and supervisor through my career. So one of those days, those X and Y axes just came together, and somehow I ended up where I'm at. So I'm not sure how that happened, but I'm glad I'm here. So in general, our agenda today is really to learn the disaster human services disciplines. And I really want to discuss a couple components here, specifically the authorities for support, understanding the disaster declaration, and why is it important for human services, disaster program linkages, DHS program linkages, and equipment and resource caches, and how DHS can support. I just want to reiterate, and you'll probably hear this several times throughout this presentation, that DHS is a supporting entity to county operations. We are not the authority. We might have some resources or resource linkages that we can be supportive of, but we are not the authority. This is a supporting entity to our friends at the counties. So just a couple pieces. We obviously know that the counties have primacy under the Pennsylvania Constitution, that most of the decisions are made at that level, including local government, even at the lower level. And we have Title 55 with the Human Services Code, as well as Title 35 with the Emergency Management Code. And I want to throw around some just general conversation that, can we have a disaster if people are not impacted? In most cases, every disaster, people are truly impacted. And it's kind of our mission at Human Services and our county partners to address those human services needs when they're impacted by some type of emergency or disaster. So just a couple things here under the Executive Order 2015-06 is really the Governor's Declaration mechanism, and to set forth the State Emergency Operations Plan that would basically assign state agencies those roles and responsibilities they have during an emergency. And of course, DHS has been assigned as the Disaster Human Services lead for the state. Well, the challenge I run into is that there's no real definition of disaster human services, so it's really come up with an umbrella. And the running joke is, if it deals with people, it's coming to Devon. And my job here is to try to figure out how, again, under the direction of the county, how to work through the process to get the counties what they need, when they need it, and how they need it to address the unmet needs of the survivors of an emergency. So moving on, we're going to have a little discussion here, and it's all real rhetorical, really, but I want you to think about this right now. What is a disaster? We have talk about catastrophic hurricanes like Katrina back in 2005. We talk about the tornado outbreaks. 2011 in Alabama, there were some 400 tornadoes that hit. What about wildfires in California? Flooding in Pennsylvania. We just passed the 100th anniversary of the Jonestown flood. I hope that's right. And I think that we had some 2,000 people that were killed back then. That was a real disaster for Pennsylvania. We also talk about your neighbor's house. If your neighbor's house on fire, is that a disaster for you? Well, could be. What about your house? If your house is on fire, it's a disaster. So really, I'm trying to put things in perspective. The disaster and emergencies are not definitive in one specific area, because what impacts someone else may not necessarily impact you. But the fact is, as a county and or state government, we have roles and responsibilities to take care of the people that are impacted. Local government historically in Pennsylvania has signed contracts for fire service and EMS services to local communities. When a house burns down, it's an emergency. Um, so the object here is to try to figure out what services are available to try to help mitigate whatever those disasters or emergencies may be. I threw another bullet on here because this is becoming very unusual for me. Is that the general and unusual of an emergency? So the challenge becomes is things after 30 years, 30 plus years in this service, I'm still getting surprised. Like, did that really just happen? But yet we have people that are impacted in a negative manner that we have to try to figure out a way to address their unmet needs. So I want to focus on a couple pieces here on the disaster recovery operations. We're going to focus on declared disaster declaration components right now. And we'll talk about why that's very important, especially with the challenges with the federal government when it comes to FEMA right now. Um, so we talk about preparedness is before the event, and as you can see, the perpendicular line that says disaster, and then we go to short term, intermediate term, and long term disasters. Well, that's recovery operations. We have some activities that are days, some that go weeks to months, and some years. We are still recovering and finishing up some programs that happened back in 2011. So we're still working through that. But as you can see at the bottom, you're going to see different agencies and organizations that are active in this type of time frame. So for instance, damage assessments and human services impacts are vital days, within hours, I should say, and days after disaster. And then we have those disaster human services, things that we're required to do under statutory authority, but then those things that we should be doing if we have the ability and resources. And what we also know is that, like every person in every household, every county has different operations. They have different resources, they have different availability, and some have more robust resources than others. Not that one county is better than another, it's just that the way the demographics are laid out within our counties. And so that brings up both the state and local and county as well as federal disaster processes. And so we'll talk about that in just a moment. But as we go into intermediate disaster recovery operations, we talk about the disaster declaration. It's important for the local governments, the townships, the boroughs, and I think we have one city, or maybe Du Bois. Du Bois come in the city now? So either way, we have a few towns. But it's important for the local governments to declare a disaster when their issues that they're trying to address meet their needs out meet their resources that they have. Same way with the county. The state will also do the same thing. If we have one or two counties that are impacted and we need additional resources, we then, through the governor's office, will declare a federal disaster declare a state disaster declaration requesting federal disaster declaration in order to get additional federal resources to help mitigate the situation. And one of the key components here, as we'll talk about, really comes back down to the reimbursement. A lot of the talk that we have today with our federal partners is that you should put in for this because it's reimbursable. And one of the things that we've noticed over the last several disasters, working with PEMA directly, as my office is actually at the PEMA building, is that a lot of our local governments and county governments don't necessarily keep track of the resources that are used to mitigate that disaster emergency, and therefore are not reimbursed. However, historically, if they're captured, we can turn that in for a reimbursement, and that's been at times about 75%. So for every $100, you're going to get $75 back in that response capability or recovery capability. So also we work with the voluntary organizations active in disaster, such as the Salvation Army, Red Cross, Lutheran Services, Catholic Charities, UMCOR, and we'll talk about that a little bit further as we move on. So the disaster declaration process, I put a couple things in here that you probably should be aware of as we move into what DHS can do to support county operations, is really defined in statutes. So the important thing is that, each county has the authority and the obligation to fulfill the emergency management role. Most counties have, well, I think all counties have a disaster or an emergency management coordinator. We also have understanding the navigation of the process. You have implementing waivers that you can do to potentially move money around or procurement. And then we also have disaster funding mechanisms at the federal disaster declaration level. You have the state, which PEMA is working on some federal or working on some state disaster funding, and then we also have the federal. In times of presidential declaration, if we meet the threshold, FEMA is able to provide individual assistance for housing and crisis counseling, case management services, as well as other needs assistance, which basically provides reimbursement for funds that are expended for loss of clothing, loss of housing arrangements, loss of cars, even dental practices and childcare. The irony about this is, in order for you to be eligible for the individual assistance, you have to fill out a small business administration application, even though you're not a small business. It's just one of those federal quirks. And you also have the HHS waivers and surge funding that they're able to provide, as well as HUD being able to work with your with DCED and your contacts to be able to potentially provide some additional housing. Now, the main graphic here you've seen historically 2 slides ago, but I want to throw in a couple things that are going to be important. This is for a non-declared disaster. Okay, so it's an emergency, maybe to a local government. It might make its way to the county government, but unfortunately, there may not necessarily be enough impact to make it a statewide disaster declaration. So therefore, it's not going to go for a presidential. This is where DHS can really jump in and help. We work with the counties to do damage assessments and human service impact assessments. Why? Because then we can use that data to try to push for a gubernatorial declaration. And we also have Commonwealth supported programs. As I said, PEMA's working on one with the county emergency management agencies, but DHS also supports with some resource linkages and potential options for housing and feeding and working with our state partners. And it's understanding that with 67 counties, we have 67 different flavors of ice cream, as we like to say. All of them could be good. So the point being is that even though we may not necessarily be directly involved with some of the human services programs at the county level, we might have contacts at some of our other state agencies and federal government who may be able to provide some additional linkages or guidance or waivers. So it's important for communication. And I want to throw out a couple things here. Many of our counties are currently working with 501c3s for their day-to-day operations for administering of human services. But there's also that VOAD program where you have that voluntary organizations who are active in disaster, who are primarily responsible for food, water, shelter, and other types of human services. So it's important to work with them collectively, both during Blue Sky Day and during a disaster, so we can try to build up those relationships and link up between the emergency management level at the county as well as the human services. Things I also want to throw out there is if anybody's ever worked through the insurance companies, realize that the bureaucracy there might be as challenging it is with the state at times. And so trying to get insurance claims, and then you have those riders that talk about flooding, like for national flood insurance, or talk about other type of damage. But then you have some of the insurance companies denying benefits due to the fact of language. And so those folks that are relying on that insurance may not get it. So hence the reason why we coordinate with the Attorney General's office and the Department of Insurance to help navigate and be a liaison with some of those folks that are impacted. Just recently, I was working with a county who had some major flooding, lost a handful of houses, and we were able to put the linkages of the Department of Insurance as well as the Attorney General's office to make sure that the appropriate folks got official representation to make sure that their benefits were paid out. And I want to throw out there, as well as with potential state resources, DHS has the opportunity within the system to make some waivers to allow it easier for survivors to get additional resources such as food and water and shelter and housing. So when we talk about our partners, it's really connecting the whole community, and who better to know the community that works within the county than the county themselves. I have some good relationships and good partners in some of our counties, but it's important to understand is that we don't know all the players. We don't know the gatekeepers. We don't know the faith-based organizations. We don't know the NGOs on a daily basis that you work with every day. So it's important for us to try to work with the, let's say, state level communications with those, say, the Red Cross or some of the faith-based organizations. But again, the counties know best their 501c3s that they work with for community action committees or contracts or ability to do the ability to provide folks for providers that the county staff may not be doing as partners. But we also take a look at the importance of working with the residents and the neighborhoods that are impacted. As Brenda indicated, there was an event that we were working with where a low-income housing unit was put out of service, and so therefore the neighborhoods came together to provide food, water, and clothing as well as support services. So it may not have been a governmental organization, but the neighborhoods became quasi and were able to work and provide resources and support services to those impacted folks. So just a couple things here, and again, I'm going to be very high level here before we get into some deeper conversation. We really provide some mass care support. So there's obviously most folks know about the challenges we had during COVID. And I think everybody had some type of challenges during that time. DHS worked with our county food banks that are independent to make sure the county's survivors or the county folks that are impacted were able to make sure there's enough food and water to provide for those who are temporarily unemployed, or make sure that the folks that needed some additional services because their children weren't getting food at lunch for the school lunch program or breakfast. And so it's important to work with our partners at the Department of Agriculture and OIM and the First Lady's office, and working with PEMA to create a feeding task force to be able to support county operations to ensure that their residents had enough to eat. Same way with sheltering. We do have some opportunities to provide some sheltering for low-income housing, but it's more of a coordination aspect. So disaster human services, as we talk about, which is on the right hand of your screen, we talk about that umbrella. It really comes back down to that if you really need some additional support, as in maybe just a sounding board, is there any resources available? Can DHS provide those partnership linkages? And that has historically happened. And so our team here at the emergency response, we're not here to dictate how things get done. Our job is, okay, county, what do you need? How is it our job to work with you to get you resources that you may be able to leverage? Maybe it's something by getting a waiver from DHS, or maybe it's a waiver from HUD, or even it might be a waiver at the federal level for HHS and or the Housing and Urban Development. So some of the examples of support what we've done in the last 2 years has been county staffing. So we supplement county staffing during an emergency. So they have a problem, they need some additional resources. They don't necessarily have contracts in place, although they will encourage it. We might come in for a couple of days under the direction of the county to try to support that operation. What does that look like? How does it work? Mr. Commissioner, we may be able to do it. Mrs. Commissioner, I'm not sure we can get that done, but we might be able to provide you some resources. We also have the ability to work with OIM, our Office of Income Maintenance, for SNAP waivers and timelines. So if you have an electrical outage longer than 4 hours, we may be able to say, hey, look, normal SNAP replacement waivers are for 10 days, but we can probably get an extension through FNS at the federal level to allow that for 30 days, which did happen here recently about a month and a half ago. So community outreach as well. One of our counties that was impacted by a storm a few months ago said, hey, look, we really want to get some emergency behavioral health folks out to touch base with the impacted communities. Is there any way you can help us out? And the answer was, well, that we can do for a short period of time. Absolutely. So we brought in some folks that had some training, and we brought in some other folks that had some just-in-time training on how to address the psychological first aid and skills for psychological recovery, which was basically just a real simple evaluation. We took, at the request of the county, took some information, and we made referrals back to the county human services and county mental health to make sure that those survivors had the ability to have a touch point to make sure that any needs that they may have or any psychological impacts that they may have were made available. Same way with mass care support. We had one of our counties had their largest water distribution center that ended up going out, causing about 100,000 people not to have water for about 2 to 3 days. And working with the county, great support. We were able to work with them and the water company as well as PEMA to be able to address the shut-ins, the folks that couldn't get out to the water distribution, to ensure we had delivery to those persons with access and or functional needs. And then just even recently, which seems to be a reoccurring theme, is that we work on behalf of PEMA to work with our county emergency management agencies to address any issues at a multi-agency resource center. Basically, that center is after an emergency or disaster, the county would choose to set up a one-stop shop where state agencies and county government and county agencies and voluntary organizations can come together in a single shop at one location and see what benefits are available. At that point in time, DHS would leverage its OIM staff as well as children and youth and other staff as needed to be able to provide any unmet needs that we can, which includes benefit review, as well as, hey, you weren't eligible for funding prior to, but now that your house is damaged, you may be eligible for funding now. So again, just want to throw this out there, is the county has the authority to have a jurisdiction, not DHS. Our job here as the emergency response team is to support the counties under the direction of your leadership. It's not us. If you tell us you don't want to do something, great. We're going to provide you guidance based upon historical best practice and or this is what we have available or what we can do. We will give you our recommendations, but at the end of the day, your decision is your decision and we will support that as best we can. So just another information about a mark. This is just one of the marks we were at historically. As you can see, we send staff there to make sure we do benefit reviews. Somebody who may have not been on some type of benefit because of the damage to their home, they're now eligible. So it's important to get as many folks to the mark as possible to make sure that we can provide as much and as many benefits as possible, not just from DHS, but from other state agencies as well. As an example, flooding is a big disaster potential in Pennsylvania. It happens regularly. And a lot of times folks have their birth certificates and or driver's license at another location that gets flooded. Did you ever try to get a birth certificate without a driver's license? Did you ever try to get a driver's license without a birth certificate? That kind of puts us in a situation where we need to bring our partners at PennDOT and Department of Health and DHS all together so we can get IDs made, so we can get folks benefits that may be available through both the state and the federal government. So just a couple of services that we can also do is training, which we encourage to work with the human services and the emergency management agency. We've got to do this as a symbiotic relationship. So we do community mass care, which is really talking about the food and water after a disaster. And again, I want you to reflect on what a disaster truly is. If your neighbor's house burns down, it's a disaster to them. Your neighborhood floods, that's a disaster. If your house burns down, it's a disaster for you. So we want to talk about the training, what we can do for community mass care and engage your community partners. Recently, as a matter of fact, it was like 2 weeks ago, moving on to last week, we had a county that did a tremendous job, a great job working with the county, local voluntary organizations and faith-based organizations, that they were able to provide resources for all those impacted. We're a resource for them, but they didn't need us, and that's great. Because they did the legwork ahead of time to do the training and brought in the community action committees and the voluntary organizations to be able to provide those services. So we talk about emergency behavioral health. We can provide like skills for psychological first aid, skills for psychological recovery, some basic training for that. We also talk about disaster housing, which can be specific. We also have specific human services training. If you feel that your community needs a specific training, let us know. If we don't have it, let's dig into it and see where we can find it. A lot of times, some of our federal partners actually have the training put together. We just have to leverage it. Sometimes it requires us to bring in trainers, and other times we can do a train-the-trainer and get the federal government and or state government to be able to bring in the appropriate resources to train local government. So that way we have a community capacity building program. So build capacity at the local level, which is what we're trying to enable at this point in time. So moving on, just a couple of things that we have as assets. We have points of service and community delivery. This is just one of our trailers that if you have a major event or an event that you're working at, we can set up full Wi-Fi capabilities using satellites. And we can move this into a socially isolated population to be able to work on your human services recovery operations. Or if you have a challenge, let's say you have a continuity issue where your building that you're supposed to be in to work at is also damaged and or doesn't have resources, we can set up a few of our pieces of equipment and resources to be able to help address this. So you can plug your computers in. As you can see, we do have a microwave there. It's important to have the coffee ready. But we have the ability to set this up. It fits about 6 to 8 people, depending on how cramped you want to get. But the bottom line is we have this available for the counties to use. And as you can see, we also have some resources to be able to set up some tents. So in the event that you have a catastrophic event, you want to do human services outreach or work with your county emergency management agency to do some activities for outreach and funding. This is something that we might be able to support with, let's say, the county donations management for food and clothing or some other activity. So again, these are just some of the commodities. And within that, I'm going to suggest that you work with the county emergency management agency. However, we do have emergency food, water, and shelter available for mass care events. So again, doesn't mean that you put a request in, you're going to guarantee to get it, but we're going to try to work with you to make sure that we fit and meet all the requirements that we have the capacity and capability to do. Again, as our team knows here at the emergency response and recovery team, is that our job is to be humble and servant to the counties because you guys are the authority having jurisdiction. It's our job to serve and not dictate. So just a real quick, I want to touch base on a couple pieces for the voluntary organizations active in disaster. So the question becomes is what is a VOAD or an NGO? Well, in most cases, most folks know what the voluntary organizations are, and most counties work with non-governmental organizations or NGOs. But the VOAD is slightly different. Their primary role and responsibility is during disasters. And that is organizations such as the Red Cross or Salvation Army, working with UMCOR, Catholic Charities, and also we have Operation Barbecue Relief. We have Team Rubicon, which is a team that comes and does things that are primarily made up of veterans communities. We also have organizations that work through the Amish community that will come in and do mucking and gutting and help families return their home to at least a semi-livable condition. So as floods come in, they might come in and assist by doing flood cuts, working on drywall, checking the look at the appliances, the water heater, the heating units and electrical systems, and trying to get things put back in order to take care of the housing needs. As we all know, the housing situation for low income housing is not exactly robust at this time across the Commonwealth. And so sometimes the easiest thing to do is to keep people in their own homes, which they want to do. And by doing that, that requires coordinating with organizations such as the Lancaster Mennonite group, who has, even though it's out of Lancaster, they've got groups across the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and across the nation who will set up work camps to come in and assist with recovery operations to get people back in their homes instead of staying in a shelter. And we also know that there is a lot of challenges with that, bringing in external partners. So the challenge is to try to integrate them into the workforce and work with the county human services as well as county emergency management. Historically, the county emergency management is a coordinating entity, but it's the human services or the delivery experts and subject matter expertise. So it's important to develop that partnership between that human services and emergency management regularly. Some of our counties, as soon as there's a disaster, one of the human services staff goes over to the county and stays there until the disaster's over to act as a liaison, which is very important for delivery of human services to the community that's impacted. And we do want to recognize the fact that there is insurance issues and there's a lot of litany of other workman's comp related issues, questions. And so that's really something that the human services and the county should be working with the county emergency management agency to try to link things together and see if there's a way to bring in those voluntary agencies to do the work. Um, so even as I talked about earlier with one of the counties who did a tremendous job bringing in the local communities, there are some counties and some communities that don't necessarily have a robust voluntary organization, which is where the Pennsylvania organizations, Active Disaster, will come in. They do have a statewide confederation that's able to provide a lot of these resources. And so as you're working on the human services side to get folks back to a daily living, you can also coordinate through the County Emergency Management Agency in PEMA, who would be working with the PA VOAD and the Voluntary Agency Liaison, as well as myself and my team to make sure we're addressing all the county needs. So moving on to partnerships, again, I talked about this probably ad nauseum here when I talk about the county partnerships with emergency management. Human services Human services is a dire component to the integrating of emergency management. And it's hard for me to say that you should send one of your staff over every single time there's an emergency, especially since you don't necessarily have enough resources or funding to do everything that you need to do on a blue sky day. But from a coordination aspect, it has a tendency of helping that relationship grow. And it also allows for additional resource coordination and linkage to provide those resources to the survivors of any type of disaster or emergency. And remember, the definition of disaster is very ambiguous. So, um, so apologize for the spelling here because I see I've already made 3 mistakes that I'm aware of, and I can't spell to save my life. Um, really, we want to look at potential resource linkage and support again, and information sharing for unmet needs and potential reimbursement. Goes back to the key component that if DHS as a whole is supporting county operations, every dollar I can leverage from the state using assets will go back into reimbursement. And this is why it's important to work with the county emergency management, because every dollar your county human services is spending on disaster recovery could potentially, under a federal declaration, get reimbursed. So anything from snow removal in the wintertime to roads and bridges to personal assistance services or mental health outside of their normal business hours. So if you have overtime that's accrued for your disaster human services people, that should be reimbursable for the most part, provided we meet the criteria for the public assistance declaration. So it's very, very important to talk about and coordinate with the County Emergency Management Agency for information sharing and unmet needs and for potential reimbursement. So just in recap, I'm just going to hit a couple pieces here. DHS has resources and technical assistance outside of normal operations to potentially support county human services during emergencies. And again, I want to share that that is very ambiguous. If you feel that there's an opportunity to partner with DHS to see if there's something that we can find that may be able to help you, call. It's as simple as that. We may be able to find you some resources. We may be able to coordinate some additional linkages. We may not, but you have nothing to lose. And then partnerships with and planning with the county emergency management is going to be critical. So pre-event relationships planning. It's kind of like any other relationship. If you don't nurture it, it's not going to grow. Um, or unless you've been trauma bonded together. So the challenge is to make sure that you maintain those relationships between the human services and emergency management. And the other recap here is to make sure that you do your best, if you can, navigating the bureaucracy within the government, both state, local, and federal, and county, about engaging your VOAD partners. They are able to support your county residents after a disaster if they have the mechanism to do so. And as I indicated to their leadership over the last couple of years, look, you're talking to the wrong people. Don't talk to me at the state. Talk to the county leadership. Those are the ones that may be able to get you an in who can coordinate with the county emergency management and county human services. But at the end of the day, if you take away the humans out of the emergency, is it really an emergency? So everything we deal with is dealing with the people and how we navigate the system and what resources we can supply and what resources we can link up. And again, as a ending to this slide, the counties are the authority having jurisdiction. We are just a support entity. So again, the simple answer to all this is just ask. If you have a question, you have a concern, you may even think there might be an opportunity for DHS to provide some resources and support. Call Brenda, call the secretary's office, call me, call your emergency management agency, say, hey, look, I'd like to have the DHS on-call agency rep on the phone to see if there might be a possibility. But this is just a basic principle for us, is that all you need to do is call and ask. Does that mean I can provide? Absolutely not. I may not be able to give you anything that you're looking for. But on the other hand, if we can work together and I can find a resource for you, does it not make your resources and your constituents and your survivors in a better place? Do I have any questions? So I'm going to stop sharing. Is there any questions?
Questions, folks, or any experiences that you've had in your county that you would like to share? That's also a relevant conversation for today. You can either type in the chat box that you have a question, or we have a small group, so you can just speak up. Okay, well, if we have no further questions or interest in having discussion, I think what we can do is probably give you a couple of minutes back in your lunch today. First of all, I want to thank Devin for taking the time to share with us the information that he was able to share today. I have been recording the session, so we will be able to make it available afterwards, and I'll let you all know how you can access that at some point. I'll again also reinforce Devin's message. If you think there's something that we might be able to do to help you with what you're experiencing in your county, call me, call Devin, call the secretary's office. Let us know what's going on and we'll talk through it. Maybe we can spend some time planning together and figure out if there are resources that we can put you in touch with that you might not be aware of. But again, we appreciate you taking the time, and we hope that you have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to talking with you in our July session. I did confirm that the July session will be on the Medical Assistance Transportation Program. So whether you're still a direct county provider or you're involved, the county's still on the line for MATP. So plan on joining us for that session. That is on Tuesday, July the 8th, and there'll be a notice coming out. So again, thank you all so much. Great to see you, and have a wonderful rest of your day.